I'm here with my good friend Richard Walt, and we are going to do the unboxing of his new book, Betwixt God and the Devil. Now, the first time that you see the finished product will be now. So let's do that.
Okay, without further ado.
Can you tell me what this book is about?
Yes, it's really a history of folk magic in Essex, primarily from the time of the 17th century, because that was when there was a major change in Essex witchcraft due to the law and changes in attitudes, where you got cunning folk setting up in opposition to witches. Although, as I've shown in the book, it wasn't simply a matter of good versus evil. There was a lot more to it than that.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's have a look. This way. And so, tell me what we see here. When you say special edition, what does that mean?
This is a special limited edition of 60 copies bound in Webelin leather. And gold stamped with a different design to what's on the standard cloth cover, and comes in a nice slipcase as well.
Fantastic. So what is a cunning man or a cunning folk?
I say cunning man because cunning folk were almost exclusively male, and that was the label that was given to male practitioners of magic, whereas female practitioners were pretty much exclusively labelled witches, and this was regardless of their actual practices.
So what's this going to tell us about these cunning folk?
It's really going to address a lot of the myths, showing how that, as I say, it wasn't simply a matter of good versus evil and, sort of one versus the other. Really, unfortunately, it was part of a gender-based, stereotype, really, that women got labelled witches. And also in the book, as well as the history, I've obviously gone into the origins of witchcraft and magic in Essex as we see them, which dates back to Anglo-Saxon times, and shown how it was rooted in the pagan gods, which then got labelled by the church as the devil, and then going right up to current times, and as I say, it's survivals.
So what is the title all about? Betwixt God and the Devil. Can you explain that?
Yes, I wanted to call it that because witches, contrary to a lot of people in sort of commentators have said, witches were pagans. Well, this is just not the case. Just as it's not the case that cunning folk were exclusively Christian. There was quite a mixture going on, and a lot of people accused of witchcraft and the cunning craft went to church on the Sunday, sort of paid lip service to the Christian God, but then during the week they would also, sort of work with, sort of nature spirits and other, sort of genius loci to do with the magical side of their lives.
And obviously one of the most famous cunning men of Essex is James Murrell, James Cunning Murrell. What have you brought to the table about him?
Well, and shoot me down in flames here if anybody gives me evidence to the contrary, but I've tried to show perhaps the most complete account of James Murrell's life, even taking into account a lot of sources which have been overlooked over the years, to do with influences on his healing aspects, which came from the Peculiar People, a Christian sect that set up in Hadley around the time that he was practicing. As well as the other, sort of examining the other sort of parts of his life, which have been, albeit written about by other people. But there's also another factor I'd like to bring in here, which is the fact that a lot of things that were later attributed to George Pickingill, as a Canewdon resident, that people have said was a cunning man ever since Eric Maple's time.
So you mentioned Canewdon. This is somewhere that I think nationally is associated with witches. There was always said to be a certain amount of witches there. Some of them are in silk, some of them in cloth. What's behind that story, and what have you brought to the table to do with that?
That story goes back to Philip Benton, who in his History of the Rochford 100, which was published around the sort of mid to late 19th century in I think 2 or even 3 volumes, And he gives accounts of this of Canewdon, and it's interesting to look at the sort of the history of witchcraft within Benton talks about, because he was actually very sceptical of, say, Cunning Murrell, but was fascinated by him, you know, at the same time, and actually possessed certain of Murrell's artifacts and phrenologically marked skulls and some of his books up until the time of Benton's own death.
So, what do you think the origin of witchcraft and the Cunning folk, the Cunning tradition in Essex was? I mean, does it go back to paganism? I mean, where did it start?
Really, it was folk magic amongst small agricultural communities, and the basis of it really was all about working the land and spells for protection of the land and animals and things like this, which, you know, was seen as a real threat at the time. You know, people, you know, were widely accused of, you know, sort of blighting crops, you know, cursing somebody's animals and things like this. And these were things that witches used to be accused of, rightly or wrongly. And of course, you could get imprisoned, or even, you know, in serious cases, if there was people harm, particularly if they died, that was attributed to witchcraft and curses by witches, then obviously, you know, they were jailed or even hung in a lot of cases, you know. And obviously that came to a height during the time of Matthew Hopkins, at the time of the English Civil Wars, the great witchfinder general, who basically, you know, wanted any excuse to dig out witches. But again, as I've shown in the book, Hopkins had really little interest in rooting out genuine witchcraft. It was more down to satisfying his own predilections for, you know, sort of his sadomasochistic ideas of, you know, towards women, in which he would, you know, have them stripped, poked for witch marks, which is the practice of using these pointed sticks or other implements to actually, you know, find certain places which supposedly a witch had no feeling, and also, you know, examining her body for supernumerary nipples, which witches were said to actually suckle, you know, their familiars from in a lot of accounts.
So, I mean, how much of this really relates to the supernatural, though, would you say? I mean, obviously, from what we're hearing here, a lot of it is the psychology of the people and, you know, their superstitions. But is there genuine supernatural practices involved here, would you say?
There are, but I suppose it depends what you want to label supernatural practices, because in my opinion, you know, magic is just ways of doing things which haven't yet been proven by science in a lot of cases. So, and as we know, you know, sort of things like herbalism was considered magic in past times, and now obviously, you know, most of the modern drugs we have that are, you know, in everyday use are actually derived from a lot of these herbs which are used naturally by witches and cunning folk for healing.
Brilliant. Okay, well, look, this book, Betwixt God and the Devil, is now available, and you're going to tell me how people can get your new book.
Yes, you can go to Night Circle Press. I think it's nightcirclepress.com. It's published by my good friend Andy Mercer, who has set up this company. This is his second book. His first one was very successful, his own book, which sold out with less than a week. And this is a limited edition. So, get your copies there while you can.
Brilliant. And we will obviously put a link in the description anyway. And, I mean, obviously, I can't recommend this more highly, to be honest, because there is very little that this man doesn't know about Essex witchcraft and folklore. So, congratulations. I wish you every success with it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barnes.